Life, it has been said, is like a river, or a tree, or like the path of a fluttert as it wends its way to and fro upon a summer afternoon. Pick whichever simile you find most appealing. That's life. What they all have in common is continuity, fluidity. Although to us, life may seem to variously race or drag from moment to moment, still the moments themselves are connected one to the other from beginning to end. That's life, but it's not history. Most people don't think about history per se, or the study of it. If they bother with it at all, they imagine a series of famous names and dates. Who did what to whom, when, and where? Of course, there's more to it, but even so crude a description will serve to make my point. History isn't like life. The moments are not connected. They may still flow together, they may still seem related, but something has been removed, something has been left out. We don't care what Magda ate for breakfast the morning she signed the compact. That's not part of history, unless it somehow figures into the more important event. But of course, it does. Everything figures into everything else. It may well be that had the matriarch's citrus been too tart that morning, we'd still be a colony of the Alliance rather than a self-ruling planet. But it didn't, or it wasn't, or it happened not to be relevant. Maybe it should be a part of history, but it's not. We don't have the luxury of calling all of life history. There just isn't room for it. We must depend on inference. In between the high points, the scenes and the vignettes, the day-to-day trivia of life fill in, go on, and must be inferred. Try and remember this. I've just told you a great truth. In all my time on BARSK, I have never known a dry day. To us, the rain is a philosophical metaphor. While the individual storms may vary in their intensity, there is always rain. Much like the mountains, valleys, and other geologic structures of your world, the rain is an enduring, even endearing, constant to us. And yet, one must also realize that it is never the same rain twice. While the flora and fauna of BARSK may come and go, each in its own cycles, despite the ever-changing seasons, the rain on my world knows no such patterns. There is a dynamism in our weather, which belies its sameness. Our grandmothers expressed this best with the popular saying, "Rain teaches us tenacity." I've yet to meet an off-worlder who understands what that means. There's really a good deal of misunderstanding on the topic. You need to realize that the speaker doesn't actually summon the dead back from any form of afterlife. Rather, she creates an amalgam of the person, usually as he was near the time of his death. The process involves summoning up sufficient portions of the deceased's nefshons, which allows a reconstruction of his personality, memory, and self-image. From the point of view of the deceased, the first summoning is full of confusion. It's not uncommon for the speaker to be mistaken, at least initially, for God. Hysterical behavior of the conversant is not surprising. For this reason, a speaker normally limits her conversations to a handful of individuals with whom she's become well acquainted, and perhaps even new in their lives. Tonight, before you retire, go down the way to your local economist and inquire what occurs when you have a pretty good product, numerous markets, and only a single source. Now multiply the number of products by tens of thousands, magnify their value from simply good to essential, and then expand your marketplace to include several hundred planets. All the while, hold tightly to the idea of a single source, an inhospitable world of rain and exile. The font who came to BARSK 8 local centuries ago reveled in its dampness as much as its isolation, even as the Alliance applauded its segregation. The irony of the world being wealthy cannot be overstressed. nor can the indelicate position of the font, suddenly with influence and power in a hostile empire. Political experts throughout the alliance agree that it was only the wholly subservient and one-sided compact proposed by the architects of BARSK's government that allowed the font to keep their new home. Of course, none of those experts are font, and so could not be expected to know what to look for between the lines. Although they seldom live together for long periods at a time, when font mate, they do so for life. Should one of them die, the other will not bond again, will not even conceive of it. Part of this is, of course, cultural, but part is biological. The bonding process among us involves subtle and profound physiological changes, resulting in a wholeness, a merging among paired font, that I do not believe exists in other sense of the alliance. A consequence of this is that only mated font will reproduce, bonding being a necessary component of procreation. Sexual intercourse among unmated font is always recreational. Almost always. Perhaps once a generation a calamity occurs, a child is conceived where none should be. Such children are called soulless, for they exist without benefit of bonded parents, and thus are assuredly lacking those characteristics of spirit which the rest of us take for granted. While we can certainly agree on their value, specifically defining or naming these characteristics is problematic at best. Perhaps it is simply that, at least among font, our parents' gift of nurture is as critical as that of nature. The parents of the soulless, however, are absolved of all responsibility. The infant is birthed in secret and then abandoned. Its maternal grandparents carry it to some central place, usually the community's octagon. There it is abandoned, a child not born of true parents, left for the community to provide for, if not rear. A child apart in a society of extended families. Conceived in a lapse of biological order, the soulless are usually malformed, sickly, and seldom live more than a few years. Rarer still are those who do survive, growing into maturity without the guidance of parents, the support of aunts, the camaraderie of siblings. Even those few almost never achieve full adulthood. Instead, these uncommon adolescents inhabit mythology, seeming to manifest strange abilities, all the while living as outcasts in a community that feels a grudging, guilty, confused responsibility for them. When one compares paranormal abilities in terms of their respective entertainment value, summoning fares rather poorly, being more of an individual experience than an event for spectators. Other talents are both more interesting and far rarer. While there has been only a single documented case of psychokinesis, across the many worlds of the Alliance may be found dozens of empaths, telepaths, precognitivists, mesmerists, and no less than 2,000 psychic healers. Individuals possessing such abilities are otherwise the same as you or I, capable of equivalent acts of kindness and prone to the identical frailties of existence, personality, and circumstances. And while such singular faculties may result, on occasion, in a gross caricature of one trait or another, they are still a far cry from being riveting theater. Fortunately, there are other examples in popular culture. Upon some frontier worlds, it is not uncommon to hear that elemental spirits have been observed to trade information of natural resources for carnal unions. Among the rebellious worlds of the fringes, there are rumored to be people who serve as hosts for supernatural beings in exchange for weird powers which mask the senses. Then, too, when Thelos escaped the confinement of Central's grandest penitentiary more than 5 centuries past, leaving behind better than 1,000 maimed and dead in his wake, the surviving guards claimed he was possessed by some nameless creature, the avatar of a headless elder god. Credible? Difficult to say. As for me, I've always found it easier to grant a token acceptance to most superstitions, just in case. What's the harm? There is as yet no a priori way to tell if a given individual can be a speaker. While current theory does posit a genetic predisposition, just what that predisposition is remains unknown. However, it is useful to look for a pattern among those who have already become speakers. First, realize that 99 out of 100 speakers are female. The competing explanations range from the chromosomal to the hormonal, with no accounting for the rare male who shows the ability. Secondly, at present, of the approximately 1,700 known speakers in the Alliance, a full third can be found on BARSK. This is easily explained by an examination of the juxtaposition of several factors. Quof, the drug that all speakers use to manipulate nefshons, is exceedingly expensive, highly toxic, and in limited supply throughout the Alliance. While anyone may use Kof to see nefshons, gaining control over them may take numerous doses, if it occurs at all. On BARSK, however, where supply and expense are not an issue, all font children receive vastly diluted amounts of Kof as part of an annual planetary festival. By the time they reach adulthood, some will have manifested the speaker's ability to manipulate nefshons, and all will have acquired some immunity to the toxic effects of the drug. And then, of course, there are the font themselves. We're not like you. In many ways, both gross and petty, we are different. I won't list them. You already know most of them, or believe you do, and I won't add to your justifications of xenophobia and bigotry by filling in the gaps in your knowledge. We're not like you. I have seen your references. We're stronger or weaker, possessed of bizarre abilities, yet helpless cripples. We devour our children, or was it yours? We fly, vibrate, transform, or in some other way violate the physics of your world. We're not like you. We must be different. Colors are sounds to us. Abomination our sustenance, altruism simply metaphor. It must be thus, for we are so very different. And in some part, some small way, you come to believe it, conceptually, if not factually. Utter nonsense, of course, but then the point of such claims is not that they are true, but rather that they provide a justification for irrational and oftentimes violent reactions, something you could never do in good conscience to your relative or neighbor or coworker. I can't tell you the how and why of it. You'll have to ask a scientist for that. But on BARSK, we have 5 distinct seasons. This contradicts the general impression that BARSK has only one: rain. Maybe it is simply that since font enjoy the rain so much, we have gone out of our way to classify it by feature and dimension. Or perhaps we're simply taxonomists at heart. The year begins calmly enough in mist. The rains are continuous but light, and the cloud cover is at its thinnest. As the season continues, that which was light becomes heavier. Clouds thicken and deepen, and day becomes an almost theoretical term in the dark. The season of dark escalates into storm, and the clouds which have been steadily watering the world increase their activities more than 8-fold. As the season progresses, thunder and lightning become more common, almost continuous. The sight and sound of electrical storms at this time of year are beyond description. Ultimately, though, they too pass, and the torrents of rain increase again and yet again into flood. As the waters rise, the hurricanes begin, signaling the 5th and final season: wind. Despite their power, the clouds are torn apart and scattered for a time, eventually to return and bring a new mist with them. On BARSK, it is commonly believed that wind is the season of luck, both good and bad. The explanation is simple. You can't stir things up that much without something happening. Foremost to keep in mind is her affliction. When one considers all that Marda accomplished in her life and comes to appreciate why the font of BARSK venerate her as the matriarch, the fact of her epilepsy is easily lost. And yet, history is most often made by those individuals who, unwilling to accept their role of victim, not only rise above their physical limitations, but their time as well. In Magda's case, long before she discovered the drug that made her the first speaker in the Alliance, she had discovered in her seizures a gift for prophecy. Indeed, with the exception of the prophecy from her last attack, the images she perceived while held captive within the chaos of her damaged brain always came to pass. It is this last vision, the flaw in an otherwise unerring oracle, that is so tantalizing. In the last moments of the night, Magda is said to have burst from her home, somnambulant and grand mal, crying out, "When next I awake, I'll be dead," even as she collapsed into a coma, never to awaken again. Most seem to think it is easy, that one of the requirements of scholarship is the ability to write briskly and coherently with little or no struggle. Doubtless, these same people honor the superstitions surrounding five-petaled flowers and insist they have a winning system when they're involved in games of chance. The reality of it is that writing is arduous. It's not generating the ideas that's difficult. There are far more things I want to write about than I have time in one life. No, the laborious part is tricking the words, lulling them into a false sense of safety and greenful peace, and then transplanting them from the mind to the page or screen. It is one thing for me to have the perfect idea in mind, to possess a brilliant insight, stunning metaphor, or illuminating perspective, but transferring it from the private world of personal experience to the frightfully limited domain of grammar and vocabulary, that's the hard part.